Good evening, everyone. We'll go in accordance with the hands raised. First, we have Mark. Mark, you can unmute.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
So my name is Mo Gonsalves and I am from the Web Developer Group. And my task this time is to create a project timeline based on the real-time stock market web application. And this is the presentation for that. So moving on to the table of contents, we have the introduction. Then we move on to the features of the timeline. Then we go to the timeline itself of this project. Then we have the Gantt chart, then the documentation, and then we finally end with the conclusion. So moving on to the introduction. So now timeline is basically just a visual representation of like a sequence of events or tasks which can be planned in a very efficient manner so that you can achieve the best possible results. So to elaborate on this further, I can relate with a personal experience of mine as at the end of every semester, we normally have to create a project based on whatever we have learned throughout the semester and then submit that project. And normally we are in a group of about 3 to 4 students. So this is starting off in second semester when we were given there's a deadline to submit a project. We normally just played around, goofed around until like the end, and then finally, then we all start cramming, and then you get overwhelmed completely by the work that's left to be done, and then it leads to those, weekends where you're up 3 to 4 at night with your friends in a Discord call, 2 3 Red Bulls, trying to complete all the work and finish and get it done. And then finally the end product also isn't that great, and so unsurprisingly we don't even get a grade that high. And then fast forward to our fourth semester where we decided, you know we let us learn from a second semester. We made a very bad we made like a very bad project, and then we just goofed around a lot of the time. So let's just create a timeline and strictly follow it. Let's see what happens from there. Hopefully, we can get a very good grade this time. So we created a timeline, and this time we actually did follow it. And then surprisingly, we actually did finish ahead of time. So we actually did have time to go back, check everything that is, if it's done exactly. We did a lot of, reruns, retesting, debugging, everything. And this time we actually did get a really good grade. And, it was all good in the end. So the timeline is like very important and like very useful for creating a very efficient project and like very good at managing your time. So it's basically a timeline. It will just list out all the tasks involved and like the deadline for each of the tasks, and it will be useful again for like documenting any type of development or any problems that are there in the project. So it will just help you like to structure all of your activities and like find the most efficient way to complete the project. So moving on to the features, it's basically these are the biggest features of timeline. You have the time management. It will make you basically it will set certain time periods within which you'll have to finish the task. And then if you don't finish, you can probably have a little bit of leeway, but normally it's required that you finish in the certain allotted amount of time. And then next we also have the planning, where you basically plan and organize the tasks in like an effective manner so that, not many problems encountered. It's not like you won't encounter any problems, but it will minimize the amount of problems that you do encounter. Then next we have the resource allocation. So basically this is the allocation of the resources like which will be used in the completion of certain projects. So if it is all planned out properly, there'll be like a proper resource allocation and everything will run more smoothly. So then moving on to the timeline. The timeline for this project we have it's distributed across 2 months. So altogether 8 weeks. So this is for month one. So in month one, we are basically just doing uh, in month one, in week one of month one, we are basically doing the introduction to React.js, where we are, understanding the JSX syntax and then doing like state management in React.js. Then we also have the setup of the project environment, where we are basically just installing Node.js, Express.js, and like we are setting up a basic file structure, which will basically be the foundation for the project. And then we move on to week two. In week two, we have styling. So like the styling of the application is done like using CSS, and it will create like a much more responsive design that a user can interact with. And then we also have the user authentication, which is just done using JSON Web Token, otherwise Passport.js. And this is mainly done so that a user can have his own privacy and nobody else can access a certain other user's data. Then moving on to week three, we have API data gathering. That is basically we are understanding the Alpha Vantage API, which will be used to like pull the real-time stock market data, which can be used further as we will see. And then we also have the front-end display. So we are basically using React.js components to display the real-time stock market data in a very like easy to understand format, so the user is not overwhelmed by the data that he receives. And then next in week four, we have basically adding the search functionality. So basically adding the search functionality so that a user can search for specific stocks. Otherwise, if he wants to he can filter certain stocks based on his preferences. And then next we also have the testing and the debugging in week four. So in testing and debugging, we are basically just using the frameworks like Jest, otherwise Enzyme, or to test the applications and like debug any errors that are found. As errors are very, it's not like you won't find any errors, but you don't even need to find any bugs because that will really hamper the user experience. So moving on to month two. In month two, we have week one. In that there is a data visualization. So basically we're adding data visualization to the application by using tools such as T3.js, otherwise we're using a chart.js. So this will basically take some of that data which is gathered by the Alpha Vantage API, and then it will interpret it in a way and output it in the form of graphs so that it could be easier for a user to understand. Then next, we also have error handling. In this, we are basically handling the errors and the edge cases in like the application, such as like an incorrect user input, otherwise like any API errors. And then next, we also have in week two, we are basically building the backend of the API by using Node.js, otherwise Express.js. And then this will basically be used again to store any of the user's data, otherwise any of the API data that we do get. And then next, we're also creating APIs that will be used to again handle the user authentication, then the data retrieval, and also the data manipulation. So the API will also be interacting with the backend for transfer of information, otherwise again for data manipulation. Then next we have week three. And in week three, we are integrating the news API, and we are integrating this to display the relevant information regarding a certain stock. Otherwise, any news articles for any stock, like in general, as to invest, you actually do require to read the news to see how well a stock will do, what are its growth options, how well it will perform. So this is all very important. And then next we have the real-time updates. In real-time updates, we are basically using WebSockets to ensure that the data is displayed and is always displayed and is always up to date. And then next we have week four. Week four, we have optimization and deployment. So in optimization, we're basically just optimizing the performance of the application by using like techniques such as code splitting, lazy loading, otherwise caching. And then we finally end with the deployment, where we basically just upload the entire application to a web server like AWS. So this is the entire timeline. And then we move on to the Gantt chart for this for this timeline. So before I show you the Gantt chart, let us just like understand as to what a Gantt chart is for anyone who doesn't really know. A Gantt chart is basically just a horizontal bar chart which has the time on the x-axis that is represented in days, and then we have the project, the tasks of all the project on the y-axis. So this will basically just plot a horizontal bar graph based on all of these inputs, and then it is also used to like plan and then like coordinate and then like track all the project, like track all the tasks of the project if there's any problems, how much progress has been made, and if like any task is running behind schedule. So let me just show you the Gantt chart for this project that I've created. So this is the Gantt chart, and as you can see, on the x-axis we have the time basically just represented in days, and then on the y-axis over here we have all of the tasks listed above, which I just mentioned in the timeline. So these are all the tasks, and then this is the Gantt chart. This is essentially the Gantt chart. So here we have month one, and these are all the tasks in month one. And then over here we have month two, and these are all of the tasks in month two. So if any task is completed, you can just like click on this and then like mark it as done. Otherwise, if you need to add any more subtasks or any files to this task, because you'll be sharing this Gantt chart to other people so they can access this. They could even have access to the files. So you can add like a description, a subtask, or even add any files. So this is basically the whole Gantt chart. And over here, you can just add like the number of days it would take to complete this. So like say suppose for introduction to React.js, I've added like it could take 4 days for its completion. Then this styling of the application could take another 3 days. So you can even add the number of days. So moving on to the documentation of this project. So here we have the documentation. This is again the project timeline, and these are the table of contents where we have the introduction, objective, the key features, the timeline itself, the Gantt chart, the conclusion, and then the references. So this is basically the introduction that I had already given. And the objective is basically just to provide like an overview of how the project timeline works, to explain again its purpose, its features, and all of its benefits. And then these are just some of the features like again can be used for task sequencing, the task durations, and create milestones, critical path, the start and the end dates. These are just all the features of it. So again, useful for like risk assessment and all that. And then again, as explained, this is the timeline and all of the tasks. So we have like month one, then like week one, week two, week three, and so on. We have all of the weeks and all of the tasks along with a certain description mentioned. And then next, we have the Gantt chart. So basically, this is just visualize. So Gantt chart is basically again just this tool which will be used to visualize the project timeline. So these are just some features of the Gantt chart, and then below I have also attached the snapshots of the Gantt chart that I have initially created. So these are just some of the snapshots that I have added, and then finally we move on to the conclusion. So moving on to the conclusion, we have basically a timeline is basically it's an indispensable tool like for a successful planning of a project. It's highly recommended and required to use a timeline, as basically it's basically just like a roadmap that guides like this teams to and the decision makers like throughout the project's life cycle. So it's really good for decision making, and it's also good for finding out like any problems that could occur or have occurred, or like if there are any roadblocks in the middle that will any problems that could actually hamper the progress or something. It's easier to find it out like that. And then it also allows like the project managers to break down like these complex projects into like much more smaller manageable steps and like spread it across a time period instead of mixing everything up and then some thing doesn't match with the other. So this is really good for like spreading the workload across like a certain time and like just giving a smaller workload to all of the people involved. And then finally, we have the references. So basically, these are the references that I have used to create the Gantt chart and like to understand how Gantt chart works. And then finally, just a reference for the timeline to understand like what's the purpose of a timeline, what are its benefits, and how it's used. And then now this is the end. So if you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Mark, can you share the document with me? Just share the link.
Or share the link.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, have you received it?
Yeah, I have.
Yes.
Okay, Mark. I do have a question about the API because I think that without that API, there won't really be an application in the first place, right? So can you tell me
Which API
the
exactly?
how exactly the Alpha Vantage API works?
The Alpha Vantage API we are basically just using to gather all the real-time stock information, the stock data, the real-time stock data, and then we are going to gather that, and then we are going to display that. First, we can just gather that to a database, and then we can use that to display it to the front end, like to the user.
Okay.
So,
So are there any alternatives to the Alpha Vantage API?
So it's not like we always have to use Alpha Vantage API. There are multiple stock trading API. There are different APIs that you can use. It's not like always you have to use this.
Anything that you can recommend?
So if you check online, I guess you can find quite a few. I'm not sure if Zerodha also does some, but you can find quite a few stock trading APIs that you can like find quite a few. Upstocks also, there's a trader API for Upstocks again that you can use. So it's not like there are any limitations for which one you can use.
So is this API licensed, or was it if it was licensed, is it made by a particular organization or was it made independently?
So you're talking about Alpha Vantage
Yeah,
API.
I'm talking about Alpha Vantage.
So I'm not 100%. It has to be licensed in order again to, it should actually be licensed and legal, to access the stock market. Otherwise, it's it's basically has to be licensed, but I'm not really sure as to which organization has created it.
Okay, fine. Uh, I felt like today in your presentation you sort of lacked energy because the start of the presentation felt quite dull today. Other
Yes,
than that, the PPT was fine. The document was also fine. One suggestion that I would make is that even if you're working on like project timelines and stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
Try to dig deeper into what kind of technology is being used. Okay, so that you
Yes,
can
sir.
tackle any sort of questions regarding it. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Other than that, it was fine. You can stop sharing.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sanu, you can unmute.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. My name is Anu Dekar. Today is my first presentation. and I am enrolled for AWS DevOps. My first task is create a Linux instance on the AWS EC2. Firstly, this is my agenda. What is AWS EC2 instance? Their benefits, steps to create a AWS EC2, connect the instance with the putty and terminate the instance and conclusion. Uh, Firstly, we talk about what is AWS EC2 instances. Uh, the Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud means the Amazon EC2 is a web service that provides a secure, reliable compute capacity in the cloud. It is designed to make a web scale cloud computing easier for developers. EC2 provides one type of virtual server or the virtual operating system we can use by AWS account. We can create a virtual OS without a uh, without a physical server. Then their benefits are elastic web scale computing. Second one is completely control. Third one is flexible cloud hosting services. Fourth one is secure. Fifth one is inexpensive, and sixth one is easy to start. Then uh, then steps to create for AWS EC2 instances. Firstly, we sign up for AWS. It is a paid, but AWS provide a free tier account for 750 hours. Second one, launch an EC2 instance by entering the EC2 console and launch the instance. Then configure the instance. We want how to configure the instance. Then connect your instance with the putty and terminate your instances. Uh, Firstly, we start the connect the instance with the putty. I can show you the practically how it works. Stay again. Yeah, this is our Amazon AWS console. Firstly, we search the EC2. Yes. Then click on the instance, or we directly goes and launch the instance. Then take a server name like whatever you want. I'm just taking Akveda. We choose here Linux server. Then here we choose free tier. There is a limitation for free tiers. There is available for Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. Then there is we want where the bit is the 64 bits. Then their instance type is 2 that micro. It's provide the 1 GB RAM, one CPU. Then we want to create a key pair and put the key pair name. Yeah. Then click on the PPK. Therefore, the PPK is download the putty file and create a key pair. Uh, then we Then we create the network settings that is allow the HTTPS and allow the HTTP means we can access by the IP addresses. Then instance will launch the instance. It takes some time for the launching. Wait a moment. Actually, we check the status here. Mention the 2x2 check. Otherwise, the instance is not launched correctly. wait it. Then we see the next part. Then we open the putty. This is a putty. It is a software that connects the Linux server to the our servers. Then we upload the authentication files here to download the putty file.
Sanu, are you showing something on your screen? Because I can only see your Chrome browser.
Just a second, I'm sharing full screen. Wait. You see the putty server? Yeah. Nice. Wait a moment, sir. For putty access, we use the public address IPv4. On the putty software, here the host name or the IP address. Just copy the IP address and put it on this side. Then at the keep air time, we download the putty file. This putty file is uploaded on SSH. Here there is authentication file. On authentication, there is a conditional. On that conditional, we use private key, and the private key is downloaded at the time when we instance are created. Yes, please check the 2x2. Then open it. This the Linux server is running. Terminate the instance because we have a limited hours for when it is a free trial account. Then just back to the presentation, connect with the instance with the putty as we showed you. Then terminate the instance because in AWS free tier account, provides a 750 hours in free trial account. Then the conclusion that we have successfully created a Linux server by using the EC2 instances. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Sanu. Sanu, I have a few questions that
Yes,
you'll
sir.
have to answer, okay? Can you exactly explain to me in simple terms what exactly putty is?
It is a connectivity tool that we use the SSH client that's connect the servers, means the instance servers connect to the local host, and for the connection of the between that the putty is used for that.
Okay. And what do you mean by SSH?
SSH is a forward that, sir. Just a second.
Okay. And why do we use public IP address for putty? Why can't we
Sir,
use any other
because
form of IP address?
actually, sir, public IP is accessible on putty. Private access, when we use the private access, we want to create the IMI users and take the permissions for that. That time we use the private IP address. Otherwise, we use the public address.
What do you mean by
Without
IMI users?
IMI users means, sir, it is a particular path to protects means we create the authorized users on that. Then the authorized users will select some IPs that provide by the AWS. That through IP we can access only the same server. Otherwise, it cannot access.
Okay. So we create IMI users when we use private IP addresses.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Fine. There are a few recommendations that I would like to make. First of all, is that try to bring in more enthusiasm while you're presenting. Another thing is that in one of your slides, I think the benefit slides, you just
Yeah.
mentioned the benefits, but you did not elaborate on those benefits. how exactly is anybody who is going to watch this meetings recording going to understand what those benefits truly mean to us, right? Then another thing is that you did not include a Q&A slide. Now in the welcome session also, I did mention that you have to include a Q&A slide. Yeah, you have to include a Q&A slide, and you have to include your email ID in that Q&A slide. Okay. Another thing that I did notice was that in the conclusion slide, you did not mention any sort of bullet points. Don't do that. You have to mention bullet points. Okay. Because you can't just give a title conclusion and then, just conclude and move on. You have to show what exactly your findings are in form of bullet points. Okay. Okay. Other than that, it was fine. For the I'm sure you'll learn from this first presentation. Okay.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. And do make sure that whatever you're doing, make sure that you're researching about it, because you couldn't even tell me the full form of SSH.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, sir, sure.
Okay. Other than that, yeah. Okay. You can stop. You can leave the meet. I don't think we have any
Okay,
other interns. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I think we're done with today's session. Thank you everybody for joining in. I'll be stopping the recording.